We are closing in on Senior Bowl week. It's time to break down the quarterback position. John, right now we have 6 accepted invitations from the quarterback position. I think we get at least 1 or 2 more. We'll talk about potential guys that could be added to this list at the end of the show. First, John, 6 guys in this group. Now, let's be transparent right off the bat. We don't hype things up just to hype things up. It's not a stronger quarterback class, and that is reflected in this Senior Bowl. However, we've watched the tape on all 6 of these guys. Some guys I am not interested in, but there's at least 2 here who I think could at least be high-end day 3 guys who have a legitimate shot to make an impact in the NFL. So as we go through this episode, make sure you drop us a comment, give the video a like if you learn even one thing. And John, let's get going here right off the bat with Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor. Now, Robertson is a guy, actually, I've been chatting up in the Rookie Big Board newsletter, kind of an under-the-radar guy all the way back to August, and there were definitely some highs to his 2025 season.
Last summer, I really liked Sawyer Robertson as a dark horse quarterback prospect, Matt. I mean, if you look right away, the first thing you're going to notice is his height and weight, 6'4", 220. And I know NFL scouts and people at the Senior Bowl are going to be impressed with the frame and the stature of the young man. And he was named the starter the 3rd game of the 2024 campaign. And he played really well in 2024. And I liked that tape when I had seen it. And if you go back to last summer, he was preseason first team All Big 12 by Phil Steele. Despite the optimism, it did not pan out as well as the Baylor Bears hoped or as far as Robertson would hope. They finished the season at 5-7, Matt, and the running game kind of disappeared, which impacted the passing game. Robertson did conclude the season with over 3,600 passing yards and 31 touchdowns. So that looks really nice. But on the ground, Matt, he only gained 17 yards rushing after scampering for 230 the year before. He took a really big dip on the ground. As I mentioned, he's 6'4", 220 pounds. He has a live arm, and he can perform well outside of script, Matt. I like him when the play breaks down. I think the Senior Bowl provides this young man with a real opportunity to bounce back and increase his draft stock. Now, I don't love his touchdown to interception ratio, 61-25. That's okay. Nothing that is spectacular. He has played 30 games at Baylor. That's right on the edge. That's my benchmark I like to see. But PFF did not like him this year with the 70.3. But when you graded him, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, you mentioned his live arm. I think that's the first thing you see, right? Really good velocity on his ball, and that carries through the second level of the field, right? So we're talking 25, 30 yards downfield. And he's got the arm strength to win into the deep field. So we like to mention, John, some guys are going to have an easier time showing up and looking good in Mobile. Sawyer Robertson is the type of guy you're going to see the ball come off his hands. You're going to see that ball come off his hands next to, maybe like a Taylen Green or Diego Pavia, who we're going to talk about. And he's just going to look better, right? He's going to pass the eye test. I think we're going to see him lead receivers downfield very well in those receiver drills, right? In game action, I really like his pocket awareness. You mentioned John 30 starts. He looks like an experienced starter. He feels pressure well. And you mentioned the rushing numbers weren't necessarily there in 2025. They were in 2024. I think he's particularly evasive for his size, right? Yeah. It's not a one-to-one, but last year I really liked how mobile Tyler Shuck was relative to his large frame. And I think Sawyer Robertson gives you a little bit of that. He's got a quick catch and release, clean drop back, good footwork. Now you mentioned the accuracy, right? Tendency to miss high, especially past the first level of the field. And I think the real problem is he struggles to properly adjust his touch, right? He wants to throw a rope. He throws it a lot. And when he puts touch on the ball, he just puts too much on the ball. That being said, John, this is one of the guys I think is a candidate right off the bat, potential, I think probably a round 4 guy, right? But I think that there's an NFL team who's going to fall in love with him, going to say, I can make this guy work in my offense. And, I think he's a guy you stash on your fantasy football bench, and he could have some value down the line. The next guy up here, John, is Luke Altmyer out of Illinois. I'm a fan of Altmyer. I think he's a sneaky. I talked about him on a recent sleeper episode, so I'll let you get into it here. We don't compare notes ahead of time, John, but from knowing what you like, I feel like he checks off a decent amount of boxes for you.
I'm lukewarm on Altmyer, and maybe it's because I have seen him play as much as any quarterback over the last 3 years, Matt. And there are moments when I watch him in game that I just kind of shake my head. But then there are moments where I really say, maybe this young man could be a pro quarterback. He kicked off his career at Mississippi in 2021 before transferring north in 2023. And last year, he was a team captain for the Illini. And he actually leaves the campus as one of the most prolific passers in the history of the program. He ranks first in career passing rating at 144 and completion percentage at 64%. He's second in victories with 23 and touchdown passes with 57. He's also fifth in passing yards with 7,607 at Illinois. And in the past 2 seasons, he has earned honorable mention All Big Ten, and he led Illinois to 6 victories over ranked teams, Matt. So that's what I mean by there's like really impressive stuff when you watch the game tape on him. But he's 6'2" and 215 pounds. I kind of feel like he's a career backup with a very high football IQ, kind of like a Chase Daniels. That's how I kind of look at him. Maybe in the right offense, maybe in the right opportunity, he could blossom. But I have questions about his arm strength. And when he gets under duress in the pocket, I think his mechanics and his accuracy break down a little bit too much. He's not an uber athlete. I don't think he can make a lot of things happen when the play breaks down. As I mentioned before, I like touchdown interception ratio. I'm looking for 3-1. He's not that high. He has 60 career touchdowns, 24 interceptions. He does have some mobility with 690 career rushing yards, and he does hit the benchmark for games played with 34. Matt, you mentioned that you like him. Why do you think the tape impressed you?
Yeah, for me, he's a sneaky round 5 guy, right? I don't want to hype him up as a day 2 prospect, but I like his pocket presence. You mentioned once the play breaks down, I feel like he does feel pressure well, right? And again, that's something that comes with being an experienced quarterback. I like his accuracy, timing in the short and midfield, and that's where I really see it, John. There are multiple examples of quarterbacks who maybe aren't the most talented, who are able to succeed in the NFL, or sorry, the most talented in terms of arm strength, who are able to succeed in a West Coast offense or an offense that, really prioritizes the first 2 levels of the field. I mean, obviously Brock Purdy is like the biggest example of that, but he's not the only guy, right? And I think Altmyer can be that guy who is accurate at the first 2 levels of the field and, just doesn't stretch the field as much. Effective touch on his ball. I think he's able to adjust velocity very well. I like his mechanics. He's got a clean throwing motion. He's got really nice footwork. It's in sync with his upper body. He's got a quick release. Illinois asked him to execute a lot of play action, a lot of RPO concepts, and I think he did that very well. So you mentioned, John, high football IQ. I think that comes through in his tape. He's a fluid athlete, right? He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Anthony Richardson in terms of burstiness, but he's fluid and he can execute those designed runs. Not a downfield threat, like I mentioned. And I think, really, what I struggle with sometimes is he doesn't throw receivers into space as often as I would like outside of the hash marks. I think he's very effective with anticipation over the middle of the field. But again, it's limited, right? So I think he's a perfect backup quarterback. And you know what? You may be thinking, why are you guys talking about a backup quarterback, right? What is that going to do for fantasy purposes? Folks, these are the guys you need to know, right? Yes. These are the guys, right? A big part of fantasy football is understanding when a player becomes relevant, are they worth picking up off the waiver wire? Are they worth having on your, deep dynasty bench? And for me, Altmyer does fall into that category, right? So if you're playing in a 5-6 round, rookie draft, or you just have extra waiver spots at the end of rookie draft season, like Altmyer is a guy I'm going to have exposure to. I see it. The next guy up here, John, is somebody who folks may be a little bit less familiar with, but I got to tell you personally, I just had a ton of fun flipping on the Cole Payton tape, quarterback out of North Dakota State. It's a fun offense.
I absolutely agree with you. I kind of like the tape. My biggest concern, though, Matt, I'm kind of a stickler for games played. He's really only started one season with 13 games played for the Bisons. So that concerns me a little bit. And then when you look at his career attempts, Matt, he's only attempted 282 passes during his career at North Dakota State. So that kind of concerns me. I do have him as a project, though. I think he could come in. Maybe he's around 6 or 7 or UDFA. Let him percolate on your bench and on the sideline for 2 or 3 years. But, man, we've seen a lot of players from North Dakota State at the Senior Bowl, Matt, while we've been doing this show. Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, and Easton Stick, and they're all still in the NFL. Cole Payton, as I mentioned, he didn't get the starting position until last year, but he delivered a very productive campaign. And if you watch the tape, that's why he was invited to the Senior Bowl. I understand why the scouts wanted to take a look at him against higher level competition. Last year, he earned second team All Missouri Valley Conference, passing for 2,719 yards. More importantly, from a fantasy perspective, he ran for 717, Matt. We love that. He had 29 total touchdowns, 16 passing, and 13 rushing. He led the FCS with a 197 passer rating, and he was named a finalist for the Walton Payton Award, which is considered the FCS Heisman. I actually think he finished third in the final voting. Matt, he has NFL size, 6'3", 233 pounds. He is that classic dual threat signal caller. I think like a team like Baltimore or Washington, to bring him in as a third stringer, maybe a possible backup in year 2, where he can sit behind dynamic quarterbacks and they might not have to change the offense if he has to play for them. I like him. Matt, this is a great opportunity for this young man to raise his draft stock. What did your study say?
Yeah, I think when you watch him engineer this offense, I think you really do see somebody who, despite the fact that he did only play 13 games, John, he looks experienced, and he sat 4 years behind Cam Miller, who folks might remember was in last year's draft class. I think was a 5th round pick. Cam Miller, he went to the Raiders, so he was behind an experienced starter. It wasn't for lack of competition ahead of him, but he waited his turn. And he looked really good in his campaign. He's a fluid runner. He's got good speed for his size. He's a physical runner, man.
Yeah, he is.
I think that, there's a little Josh Allen in there, physically willing, tough runner, something about being up there in those Great Plains states, right? He's got that aggressiveness to him, but he protects the ball. He has good decision-making under pressure, and I mean that both as a passer and a runner. He'll lower his shoulder, but he has that ball tucked. He doesn't take hits he doesn't have to take. He doesn't throw the ball into bad spots. He's accurate over the middle of the field at the first 2 levels. I always love when a quarterback is accurate over the middle of the field in particular. He's got a tight spiral. I think he can push the ball downfield. It takes a little bit of more effort than you would want to see. I think the big thing here is going to be his throwing motion. It's a little elongated. He's got a slower release than you would like, even for a guy who's a little bit bigger, right? But I think sometimes we see that, right? These guys at the FCS or non-D1 level, sometimes we see like their mechanics are just a little funkier, right? The coaching staff maybe isn't as concerned about coaching that out of them, right? So like Tyson Bagent a couple of years ago, right? And he's hung around the NFL. He had a little bit of a funky throwing motion, and I think they tightened that up when he got to the next level. So it'll be really interesting to see with Cole Payton. Again, I think probably another day 3 guy, but Payton is like the perfect example of a guy who goes to the Senior Bowl and just looks more athletic, right? And so I think that
athletic, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's going to go. I think he's going to turn a lot of heads. He's going to get that media swell because people don't really know his name yet, right? So he's a fun guy to keep an eye on. Now, somebody whose name we definitely know is Garrett Nussmeier. It's the quarterback out of LSU. I mean, going into this season, and John, I have my hand raised up. Like, I thought Nussmeier was a locked first-round draft selection. We saw that gunslinger mentality work in a really positive way in 2024. In 2025, it was a much different story.
Oh, Matt, how the mighty have fallen. Last summer, I mean, both of us like Garrett Nussmeier. I thought he was going to have a smash season for the LSU Tigers, and he was ranked among the elite quarterback prospects in the 2026 draft. Matt, to say it was bad is an understatement. He did not even come close to the expectations. And I definitely think there was a massive difference in the game study and clearly in the numbers that he put up last year for the Tigers. Now, I'll give him a little bit of a reason here. He did suffer an abdominal injury in training camp. And there had been discussion about this injury. And I wonder now, looking back, if LSU was just misleading all of us. They had such high expectations. They could not afford to lose their quarterback. And I think at times his play kind of showed that he was more injured than we thought. He was eventually sidelined in week 10 after a 3-game losing streak. He never came back to the Tigers, and he decided to enter the draft. He didn't even go to the bowl game for them. Last year, the numbers are pretty poor when you look at them, Matt. 1,927 yards passing, only 12 touchdowns. On a bright note, he did complete 67% of his throws. Anyone who wants to analyze this young man, you need to watch both years of tape. The year before, he was an excellent passer, over 4,000 yards and 29 touchdowns. I mean, we all like the tape from the year before. He is the son of a former NFL quarterback, Doug Nussmeier, and he's an old school pocket passer. I am a little bit concerned from a fantasy perspective, Matt. He has minus 153 career rushing yards. I don't see a lot of upside with his legs. I think he has a chance here to regain some of the draft capital. He's definitely not going in the first 2 rounds. And Matt, I wonder, is he really 6'1", 205? He kind of looks a little bit smaller, and I don't like his career touchdown to interception ratio at 52-24. What's your study say in the 2 years?
Yeah, so Nussmeier, I mean, the arm talent is evident, right? And that's what's going to draw you in when you watch tape. That's what's going to draw NFL evaluators in when they watch tape. And I think the arm strength in arm talent in the highlights of his tape ultimately will get him day 2 draft capital. You mentioned you don't know if he's first 2 rounds. I could see late round 2, early round 3 in a weak class. You can talk yourself into Garrett Nussmeier because the good is good, man. Like, seriously, he can lead receivers downfield very well. He can hit receivers outside the hash marks in impressive fashion. I like he is 2 different quarterbacks. When he has time, he has excellent processing and he has good accuracy. When he does not have time, oh, brother, it's bad.
It's bad.
But again, right, like, put yourself in the shoes of NFL evaluators. We see this each and every year. You watch that and you can say to yourself, well, my offensive line is good. We'll give him time, you know? Yeah. He has enough athleticism to move the pocket and extend the play. I do think it's a really interesting phenomenon when you look at his rushing stats, because his rushing stats have never been good. But he is athletic. He just doesn't want to run. I mean, when he scrambles, he keeps his eyes downfield and he's looking to make a big throw. And also remember, folks, sacks count as negative yards, right? At the college level. He had plenty of those, some of his own making.
Which is another red flag.
Right. Yes. But he's a playmaker, right? He's got that gunslinger, big playmaker mentality. He can make big plays on the run. And when I say that, I mean, he keeps his eyes downfield. He's throwing on the run. But brother, oh my goodness, he'll also extend the play far too long.
Way too long.
Throw across his body when the play's dead, throw an interception. I mean, it is frustrating. He forces the ball into tight windows too often. He forces the ball into double, triple coverage too often. And he does struggle with ball placement. He wants to play hero ball, man. He wants to play off script on every snap. And you understand, he's kind of been through a few different offensive challenges for LSU. I will say, John, you watch the first couple games of the season, head scratchers, you get really frustrated. They did end up shutting him down for like a week or so, right? I think they gave him like an extra week off the bye, or maybe it was just the bye week. And he had better tape towards the end of the season. I tried to watch both parts of the season. So I'm cautiously optimistic on Nussmeier. I've got him stashed on a few Devy teams. I'm not, just cutting him to cut him. I'm not trading him for pennies. I do think, remember Desmond Ridder was still valuable because he was like a round 3 draft pick, right? That's kind of where I see Garrett Nussmeier going. Next guy up here, John, is Taylen Green, the quarterback out of Arkansas. A big frame, athletic. He's somebody who's been well known in the Devy circles for a while. Kind of in a tough spot with Arkansas. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Taylen Green.
I wonder who's going to get more publicity at the Senior Bowl, either Colt Payton or Taylen Green. I do believe when people arrive in the Senior Bowl, and if they have not studied Taylen Green at length like you and I, they're going to be very impressed at 6'5", 235, Matt. They're just going to be blown away by his size, and he is very athletic. So I think you're going to hear a lot about that by people who've not really looked at him. He is a dynamic runner. I mean, if you look at the tape between Boise State and Arkansas, you're going to see some dynamic runs. Now, you mentioned his arm. I would say his arm is electric, but it's scattershot, right? He can throw the ball 20 feet over his target, or sometimes he can lay a dime into the right spot. So I do think there's tantalizing moments on tape, but we got to talk about that in more context. I think it's very important to analyze Green from 2 different perspectives, Matt. You can watch the game tape against non-SEC opponents. He produces prodigious numbers and incredible highlights where you're really impressed when Arkansas just had better talent on the field. But you must look at the game tape when he plays conference rivals in the SEC. His performances were very inconsistent. He was not as productive, and they did not win as many games. So there's really 2 different tapes to watch of this young man. And if you want, you can watch a third when he's at Boise. At the end of his career, though, he threw for nearly 10,000 yards and 59 touchdowns. Matt, I did not realize he had thrown for that much yardage in his career. He ends up running for over 2,400 yards and 35 touchdowns. So when you put him in a model, people are going to be intrigued by him, and they're going to be intrigued by their size. I think he's a backup like a Joe Milton. If he gets some time to learn and develop, I do see a lot of potential there. But he would really need a good quarterback coach and a good staff that can be patient with him. Matt, what's your analysis say?
Yeah, I always like to show both sides of a prospect when breaking down their film, and I never like to just kind of beat up on a guy. But I got to be honest, man, this was a hard watch. You talk about his athleticism. Yes, that's absolutely going to show up. He's quick to the edge. He's fast accelerating through open space, right? If you give him a gap, you do really get impressed at how quick a guy with his frame can move. He's fluid, right? And so that's helpful too. He's got good accuracy in the short field, but man, in game action, he feels pressure way too easily. I mean, yes. He is fast to bail out of the pocket. He'll put the ball up in just absolutely dangerous spots, right? He throws one-on-one jump balls. He'll throw into double coverage. I think my biggest red flag for Green is he freezes into the second read. If that first read isn't there, he will freeze and take the sack. He'll freeze and just bail out of the pocket, even when there's not a running lane. He tries to extend broken plays far too long, right? So he's backpedaling. He's running towards the sideline. He's just trying to do too much for too long, right? And again, kind of similar to Nussmeier, you can blame that on the offense, right? And say that he was in a bad spot at Arkansas, but he actually had a pretty good running game this year. We talked about Mike Washington in our running back episode. I just struggle to see Green translate to the next level. But this is an interesting thing, right? A thing about Mobile and the Senior Bowl is, if you have a question about the quarterback's arm, you can't hide your arm talent with athleticism at the Senior Bowl, right? Because it's a lot of passing drills. So that's what NFL teams want to see, and they're certainly going to get the opportunity to see that this upcoming week. Our last guy, John, at least at this point, who's accepted an invitation is Diego Pavia. I think we're all familiar with Diego Pavia. He has really taken over as a really, energizing, exciting college football storyline over the last couple of years. But the big question that we're going to have to answer, and that NFL evaluators are going to have to answer, is there NFL potential here? Is there any fantasy potential with Pavia?
Yeah, and I'm going to put aside the interview he had after the Heisman Trophy ceremony. That wasn't a very good look for the young man, and I do think that's going to hurt him. He's going to have to go to Mobile and really hit a home run in the interview process and probably answer some tough questions about the remarks that he stated. So let's look at him from a quarterback perspective. When you put him into a quarterback model, Matt, he's a fascinating prospect. In 2 years at Vanderbilt, Pavia rose to All-American status, and he led the team to 17 victories for the Commodores. If it wasn't for Fernando Mendoza, Diego Pavia might be the talk of the town. I mean, what he did at Vanderbilt was exceptional, Matt, in the SEC. And in 2025, he finished second in the Heisman Trophy to the aforementioned Mendoza. He was named SEC Offensive Player of the Year. He passed for 3,539 yards and 29 touchdowns. He had 862 yards rushing and 10 scores. But you've got to watch the tape, Matt. That's why I love our shows, because we look at the numbers and watch the tape. You have to understand Pavia in context. If you just look at the numbers, he's going to pop. But when you watch the tape, Matt, I'm just going to say two things that are concerning that I see when I watch him. And I watched a lot of Diego Pavia, even going back to New Mexico State. One, he doesn't zip the ball into tight windows or outside the hash marks. That is a concern to me at the NFL level. Also, when he doesn't possess the cleanest mechanics, and I don't see anticipatory throws on tape. Matt, I have him as a late day 3 or UDFA, undrafted free agent prospect. My model likes him a lot, but my film study and breaking down does not. What does your tape study say, Matt?
Yeah, another guy that was a tough watch. It's, in terms of athleticism, he's absolutely there, right? He escapes pressure well. He's quick moving in tight space. When he decides to run, he's got good bursts, and he's highly competitive, right? A high motor player. That's kind of what he's known for. He's a physically willing runner. So even though he's got a smaller frame, he's willing to go and take a hit. He absolutely lacks arm strength and velocity, right? And so it's one thing to lack arm strength, but when you don't have the velocity either, it's going to be tough to keep up with the speed of the NFL game. He feels pressure and bails on the pocket way too easily, right? And again, you understand, right? Playing a couple of years, JUCO, New Mexico, like he was the hero. And even at Vanderbilt, right? Like he was in a situation where he could play hero ball and it worked. I don't blame him. He was doing what he needed to do to be a successful college quarterback. And, he made the Heisman finals, right? So he was great at what he did. The question is whether it translates to the NFL level. Probably the biggest challenge for me is his tendency to throw behind targets and miss high. I mean, that's super consistent. You mentioned, we have the added context of we're watching the games, right? Like, we're college football fans. We're watching every team pretty much every week. And you'll see in the Vanderbilt offense, it's very well designed by Tim Beck, but it's simple stuff, right? It's for the quarterback, it's close to the line of scrimmage. It's screen concepts. It's short RPO concepts, right? And Pavia executed those well. That's why his PFF grade is good. But you're not seeing him be able to hit his targets in the midfield when he has to. You're not seeing him be able to lead receivers downfield. The throwing motion is inconsistent, and he just tries too hard to improvise on every play. In most draft classes, I think he's undrafted. I could see maybe a team wanting to take a round 7 shot on him.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say this in a disparaging way, but maybe he lands on a practice squad, right? And because he's a great practice squad quarterback, scout team quarterback. You're playing a mobile quarterback that week. You want to see, help your defense with the install. I think Pavia makes sense. The question is he going to be okay with that? We have the character concerns, right? You kind of have the off field. He comes with a little bit of media attention around him, right? I mean, so can we tone that down? Was that just a college thing? I think that's what he's going to have to answer through his process. John, we mentioned it's 6 accepted invitations. I just wanted to throw out there quickly here as we wrap up the quarterback episode. I do think that there's going to be 7 or 8 quarterbacks. We're recording this, on Monday, the 19th, right? So the national championship game hasn't happened yet. I have to imagine that there's an invitation out to Carson Beck. There's an invitation out to Fernando Mendoza. I'd expect Beck to entertain the offer. Normally when you play in the national championship, you skip the Senior Bowl just because your body hasn't had a chance to recover. But I think Beck at least accepts and does the media, right, interviews, and he needs it. Fernando Mendoza doesn't need it. No, he doesn't need it. There's also some really interesting names to watch coming up from the Shrine Bowl, right? You have Fagano out of UConn, who impressed a lot of folks. You have Cade Klubnik down there, which, I think a lot of folks are surprised to see him at the Shrine Bowl instead of the Senior Bowl. You have Haynes King, Mark Gronowski, some more athletic type guys who could, if they do well during Shrine Bowl week, could get the call up. I think that's where we get to 7 or 8 quarterbacks. I don't know if you would add anybody to that list or if there's one guy in particular you think, we're more likely to see.
No, I think we've identified the possibilities. As we've mentioned, it's not a strong draft class, so they might get that call up because they need more arms and scouts might want to look at more options.
All right, there you go, folks. Those are our Senior Bowl quarterbacks. We're digging deep. If you learned even one thing from this episode, huge favor if you're watching the video, drop us a comment. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure you give it a subscribe. We have a ton more draft content coming your way.